Hey, welcome back everyone to Slithering Salamander Scapes. Hope you are doing well. Sorry I haven't posted in a while, just been busy with life. My wife and I had a baby, so if you have kids, you know how it goes. Anyways, what we're looking at here is an old vertical paludarium I converted from a 10-gallon aquarium. I built this for my wife. It was a drip wall. What I'm going to be doing today is recycling this into something that I will have used as a temporary enclosure for a spring salamander that I had from a tiny little baby. So what I'm going to do is start scraping all this gunk away. I've got some rubbing alcohol over there on the right, and I am going to go ahead and clean this as much as I can. What you're looking at here is just some acrylic that I siliconed in, and so it covers the bottom half of the opening. It's all sealed up, but as you can see, there's all kinds of flaky stuff coming off, kind of just grime and stuff from the old build, and so just kind of clean all this stuff away, and again use the rubbing alcohol, isopropyl, and you just kind of put it on a paper towel. You just kind of continue to clean this until you can get it as clean as possible. Acrylic's a little more difficult, I think, than glass, so it took me a little while. And then I just use a vacuum cleaner, shop vac here, and I'm just getting any kind of debris out of the bottom of it, which is pretty simple, but a good step to, like I said, there's gonna be water in this, so you want to make sure that you remove as much loose items and debris as possible. It should be nice and clean, and there's some dead vegetation here and old moss, so just vacuuming everything up. I filled it with water to test it. I've got a Fluval hose from a Fluval 207 canister filter, and I'm just making sure that it's all solid. There was a little bit of a leak in the front, so I had to put some silicone. I'm not going to use this. I didn't want it to splash everywhere, but that's kind of how it'll be coming out without that little hose there. So I'm gonna have to figure out some ways so the water doesn't splash and get all over the acrylic so you can't see in and just kind of make a mess of things. So anyways, leak test all good, and then we will just essentially leave this sit for a while, make sure it doesn't leak, and then just kind of siphon the water out and just clear it out. I did use some Barkeeper's Friend, which is a chemical cleaner that I use to clean the acrylic to get it a little more clear. So I've washed it out several times and just continue to rinse it and then siphon the water out, rinse it. Just, you don't want to have any chemicals in there, obviously, when there's an animal. One thing I do need to address is the screen, the lid for the front, because remember, only half of this is going to be covered with the acrylic. So what I've done here is I've taken some window screen mesh, some corners, as you can see there, and some window screen frame, and I've just kind of measured the inside of the tank, as you can see here, and just making sure it fits nice and snug, and there it is. It looks pretty good. So all I need to do now is use some spline in the window screen and put it in, and then we'll see what it looks like. This is what it looks like. It's nice and snug in there, so there's no escape route for the whatever animal you're going to keep. So just kind of a DIY, lid for something that I already converted. So happy with that. And again, these are really important to have. I mean, amphibians are escape artists. They get out. They're notorious for getting out all the time. So I just want to be careful. As you can see, the acrylic's still not that clean, but I'll work it again. But I just wanted to show you how I address the lid situation. All right, so these here are these little metal stands. I don't have a place to really put this aquarium or this setup. So those are some zip ties. This is probably the most complicated thing I've ever done here, is using zip ties to hold something together. It's probably up there with rocket science, but anyhow, moving on to some of the rocks I took that I have, some of the hardscape materials, and I just want to cover that return up where the bulkhead is, where the water comes out, and just don't want it to splash a lot. So what I've done here is I've set up the light, which there was a little piece of wood I silicone on the top for the LED light to kind of attach to. And I've used those those metal stands that I showed you before. This is what I did. I drilled through the glass. This is just what I typically do. I've got some 90-degree barbed valves that go in with some plumber cement. That's the kind of filter I'm using. I'm just using a turtle canister filter, really basic. Some vinyl tubing, and that's pretty much it. And that's where the light will, is going to go, and that I already showed you. So just next, to address the substrate, I'm just using some simple gray aquarium gravel that I have, just to put a base layer. Not really planting any plants in this, just want to have a base layer. I'm going to put some river pebbles and some things that I got off my property out in the mountains. And right now, again, this is just going to be a temporary enclosure for this juvenile spring salamander that I have. That's what it looks like with putting all the gravel in, just to get that base layer. I'm going to show you some of the rocks here that I'm using. This is mainly sandstone and some slate. Sorry, pretty poor filming. This was kind of done on the fly this time, but anyhow, I get a lot of this stuff again from my mountain house, and I'll show you here in a second. But I just choose some flat pieces I can stack up and make some cool hides for the animal and things like that. So I'll show you here in a minute where I got it from. So this stream is actually on my property. This is where I get a lot of my my materials. I don't take a lot of it. There's a lot of slate and sandstone here, probably some other rocks. I'm not really sure, but this is creek all runs on my property. It looks a lot cooler with when there's not a lot of leaves. You can see some of the rock formations and everything, but really cool area. A lot of salamanders that actually live here. Yep, and it is pretty awesome. There's some really cool places to get moss and liverworts and things like that. So I'm really lucky to have this on my property. I used to have to find these in my friends' properties, but as you can see here, these are kind of some of the things I try to recreate. It looks like this in some of my tanks, as you probably know and have seen before, but all kinds of interesting plants, like moss and liverworts grow in habitats like this, and obviously salamanders thrive in inverts and things like that, so it's its own cool little biomes. But what I'm going to do for this juvenile spring salamander is try to create something like this. It's not going to look exactly like that. I'm not working with a lot of room here, but I've found spring salamanders, northern spring salamanders here quite often, as well as duskies and some other species like two-lined and long-tailed salamanders, just given the amount of slate in the area. But really, really cool inspiration for me, is when I go to kind of try to get these enclosures set up. So just kind of what we were showing, and just trying to stack these pieces up and just trying to find cool ways to make it look natural and just give some hides and things like that, and just thinking about how the water's going to drip and all that jazz. And as you can see, I put some river pebbles and things. Again, this is from the stream I was just showing you. I take just a handful here or there and clean it off and use it in these enclosures to give it a nice look. And so filled it up with water. It's a little cloudy, but it's all good. But I like the way it looks inside. It's got some hides and some things I think salamanders, especially spring salamanders, will appreciate. And this is kind of the way the water flows with some of those rocks that I siliconed in there. And yeah, I like the way it turned out. Let's get some moss and liverworts in here. These are just, again, some from my property, some from my house, my primary house, residence or whatever. I have a bunch of woods and moss and things like that. So note that I do put the liverwort more on the water versus the moss. The moss will just melt away. Water's cloudy, but it'll clear up. It's just, the moss is a real challenge, especially temperate mosses. So I try to keep them a little drier and just mist them versus just having them saturated. And here's the spring salamander. He's been living, I tore it apart. It didn't look this bad, but I had him since he was probably about 3/4 of an inch big, with gills, and I fed him live blackworms and some other things, and kept him in a bin with a sponge filter and an air stone, and he thrived. And he got bigger, and now he is eating small earthworms and things like that. But Really cool animal. When he gets big enough, I'm going to put him in with the other northern spring salamander I have in that enclosure, and maybe they'll mate. Again, this is just a temporary enclosure. I just felt bad keeping him in there, even though it was totally fine. I think this will be a lot more healthy for him of an environment. So I've got him in here, and as you can see, he's already exploring, which is cool to see them kind of go vertical, because typically, you're finding them under rocks and stuff. But really cool animals. I love their salmon color. They're really interesting, and they are completely like the great whites of the streams. I mean, they just eat everything. They'll eat other salamanders. They can eat red salamanders and other spring salamanders and dusky salamanders and all kinds of inverts and other things. I mean, they can get pretty big. But one of my favorite species. They're just really, really cool to watch and interactive. And don't forget the lid. Like I said, it fits on nicely. This is, again, just my temporary enclosure. There's nowhere to put it. So it's in front of some of my red salamanders' habitat, both of them. And, I like the way it looks, but, really easy access in and out to pull it off if I need to go in and do maintenance or feed. And like I said, I didn't go all out on this one like I do on some of my other ones, but I'm really happy. As far as temporary enclosures go, I think this one's pretty terrific. So with all that being said, I really appreciate everyone tuning in, checking it out. Again, I'm sorry I haven't posted in a while. I've just been so busy with work and the new baby. So thank you all for all the continued support, and hopefully to have some great content to you throughout the rest of the year. Have a good one.